Today, we're going to be tackling a very basic beach scene so that we understand all the elements from sky to the ocean, to the wave, to the sand. And you can create much more complex beach scenes after that, but this will give you the basics. On my palette, I have a phthalo blue, an ultramarine or a cobalt, depending on whether you want a warmer sea, which would be the ultramarine, or an average cooler sea, which would be the cobalt, and an aqua or a turquoise. I have white, a phthalo green, and a yellow, and definitely a yellow ochre. I'm going to start with my larger brush. It's a 10 or a 12, depending on the brush company that you're using. I like the bright because of the way I blend. You're welcome to use a flat if you like those as well. I'm making my brush a little bit damp, pulling the water off and creating that edge again. I always do that after I wet my brush so that I get my edge back as much as I possibly can. I'm going to start with the sky, a turquoisey color and a little of that mid-tone blue. And I'm going to give myself some cheat marks or pointers. I want the sky to be about maybe 2 inches across. And my brush stroke is going to be sweeping motions across this way, back and forth, as much as possible from side to side. The last stroke from side to side to softly blend that. And now I'm going to lay that down right close by while the paint is still wet. Then I can blend up into the sky and soften that line. Now remember, it's not a big space, so you don't need heaps of paint here. If you do, you won't be able to control it and it'll all just become one color. And even though it is a small space, it should be still at least as interesting as we can make it. Again, I have just white and I'm going to go right across my horizon. And if you get some streaky white in there, guess what? You just made clouds. Excellent. We like that. So now I need to clean my brush because I want to start without white in it. So I'm cleaning it off, again, wiping it dry, making sure I'm kind of flattened here. I'm going to go straight into my phthalo blue. Using phthalo, green or blue, they're very intense, highly pigmented. A little goes a long way and it can take over, but they're brilliant for the ocean scenes. So I'm going to pull up just my phthalo blue, and as best as I can, I'm going to sweep across. Notice how I'm giving myself a little leeway between the sky and the ocean. I'm not starting on there. The reason I'm doing that is because I'm not making a perfectly straight edge, but now I can use the paint that I put down to at least try and get there. Remember, it gets kind of blurry out there towards the horizon. So unless you want to use painter's tape, which by the way isn't cheating, it's perfectly acceptable, you can, or you can do it like this. Just softly take your time, blend that in. There we go. All right. So we'll be introducing just a little white in some places, but definitely we're going to start to pull in some of the phthalo green too. So I have not cleaned my brush. I'm picking up just the phthalo green this time. Let's have a look at what that color looks like. Look how vibrant that is. Now if you're doing a calypso sea, that's okay. But it's not going to be where I am right now. I'm picking up a little more of the blue. And I'm blending back in with some blue into that green. And the very softly blending all the time. I get this from by not putting too much paint on my brush. I can control the blend and just come down incrementally, not try to get it all done in one time. So here at this beach, the wave is going to kind of be here. So I'm going to leave that area as white as much as I can. I'm going to pick up a little moisture on my brush, again with the phthalo blue and the phthalo green. Let's decide where that wave is crashing, coming up. It's building right about there. So up until here, I'm pretty free to create the different patterns where the light is hitting. And I'm doing horizontal. As you can see, the stroke is just as much as possible like this. If it's a choppier day, let's say you've got really choppy ocean, you'll do shorter strokes and just kind of whip that ocean up a little bit. Get some white caps. Now remember, the white caps are not very, very white out there. You want to save all that action for up in here and the brightness for up there. But that isn't to say there aren't white caps out in the back. Maybe they are. But remember, they're smaller and just little, not too many. And now take your brush, dry it off and clean, and just blend that slightly in. It makes it a little more realistic and doesn't take the attention away from where the focal point will be, which is the wave. Taking up the yellow ochre, I'm going to put this down here and start building some sand. And I'm going to have this on a slope. So I've picked up the yellow ochre, I've picked up the white. I still have a little blue in my brush, so I'm getting a little blue coming through, which is kind of cool because it makes it look like wet sand and shadow. But remember, there's no sand that's just all one color or without shadows and lights, especially on the beach, because you're going to have wet and dry sands. So now I'm pulling it up and I'm building the substrate, the part that goes underneath all the wave action on this side of the wave. We see more of the sand at that point, so we have to think about what's happening. Here the wave is building, and then we see the wave is going to curl here, it's going to crash and come forward. There's going to be part of the wave that's crashing forward, and then there's going to be that part that's going to be pulling back. So we do get to see some of this underneath, and all of that in front of the wave where it's crashed is generally a lot lighter, and there's foam and shallowness right here. So here's our sand underneath, and I know that where my wave is, my water gets a lot lighter. I'm picking up the aqua and white, and then I'm going to pull that just across here and softly pull it over what I've just painted. If you can wait for it to dry, it will be less green, but that's okay too. Just kind of runs forward where you're creating areas where you see more of the water and some places more of the sand. So we're going to let that dry while we build our wave. So let's look at a wave. Essentially, the water comes up and it opens up so the sun can be seen through the back of the wave. So at its crest, it's lightest. Down the bottom where there's the bulk of the water, it's darker and more shaded. Where the wave tips over, there's a shadow underneath that. Yeah, even waves and water have shadows and lights. I'm picking up white with my yellow ochre, really lightly. And I'm going to build the top of the wave. I'm going to crash the wave around about there, but I'm just still going to kind of go all the way across. And the wave is building from left to right. So I'm going to use that in my brush strokes as much as I possibly can. Notice I'm just doing short strokes in the direction of the way the wave is building. All right. Now I'm going to pick up just that phthalo green, and I'm going to just start to push it up from down here into the wave. Again, just letting it build up there, a little bit at a time. Our control is by not having too much paint and not blending too much, just enough to get those colors to kind of look bright and lively through there. And I will now also come up over this side. Happening here too, happening all over. And then the top of the wave is also crashing down. So let's say our wave is crashing there. All right. Cleaning my brush, drying it off, trying to keep that edge. And now I'm going to pick up my phthalo blue again. And I'm going to create the base of the wave. If it's too bright, add a little of the phthalo green in. And now I'm going to brush up again. Start to see that pull up into the wave. You're getting that wave forming. Now I'm changing the way I'm using my brush. See, we use it like this, like a pencil, and now I'm holding it like this so it's flatter. And I'm just going to use this to add some shadow more loosely, and then into the water there'll be some shadow too. And then here, back to my pencil. And that really lightly blending at the tip of the brush helps a lot in creating that gradual blend. Also add a tiny bit of water. I guess it's okay to use water to paint water. We can get some of those shadow colors mixed in a little bit. And then when the wave comes down, it's almost the same here. The difference is going to be that we're going to put a lot of white right there. Okay, now I'm going to switch brushes. I'm going to pick up again, it's a Bright, B-R-I-G-H-T, and it is a size 2 in this brand. It could be a 4 in others. You can go ahead and redefine some of those areas if you'd like. You can make a brighter wave color. I'm using the phthalo green, white, and yellow ochre. And I might come in here and just using some water, I get that blend a bit more. And then I'm going to come in with my white. So across the top, I'm going to very lightly, just with the corner of my brush, kind of scrub like we did with the clouds, go against my brush and create little foamy areas. We don't need it to be a straight line because it's water, it's moving. Parts of it will be dropping, some of it won't. And so the break is right about here. Again, those clouds foaming right there. And now I'm going to just give myself a little guide of the actual break and carry on. And now I'm going to put the foam in here, picking up a bit, and this can become the thicker or the more foam. It doesn't need to be thicker as in heavy. We still want that lightness of water playing as you scratch your paintbrush across the surface. There might be a little bit of light, sunlight hitting the back here. And back in here. Here. And so with the white, as you can see, when you do your first go over, you lose a lot of the whiteness, but you need to let that dry, and then you can come back in and add more. So I'm going to clean my brush again, pick up a little of that phthalo blue, put some of that in. And maybe a little bit in here too. Using this. There we go. All right. So what do we do here? There's foam happening, there's water breaking, there's a lot of lightness. So what I do is I take my brush, I've cleaned it off now. I'm just going to pick up a little bit of white. Now, standing is a really great way to paint because it gives you the opportunity to move away and come back. It also allows you to have arm angles that you can't normally do when you're sitting down. So for the most part, I paint standing. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and now the paint's on the outside at this point because I want to see what's going to go here. So the little bit of paint that's going to come through on that part, I'm going to use my hand like a pendulum. It's going to come in and trace that water's edge as it comes up to the sand. I can add more foam when I know how that's all going to look by turning it around now and using painted edge and start to do this all the way up here again with that breaking the brush up a little bit and creating those foamy edges. And even put more here as there's maybe a splash or two there. And sometimes just the foam is receding, not a whole lot of water, so you can even put some out here onto the sand and bringing it up into the ocean area. And as it gets up in here, I start to join them together just a little tiny bit. Nothing too obvious, but just kind of a few little areas where they kind of join and create that lozengey sort of shape. And some of them even wander on up here into the next wave area. That's a bit too direct, so I'm going to kind of obliterate a little of it. So there you go. We have our sky, we have the horizon, the mid-water area where you can get some white caps. Once you've got this area on, you may be able, with a small amount of paint, go back in and add a little extra white to some of those places if they've lost the edge, depending on the kind of day it is. Come on forward to, there's an area here where maybe there's another wave forming right in here on its own. There we go. And then these are all rolling forward into the wave, lights, darks, shadows. And underneath here, at the very front on the sand, cleaning my brush, picking up just that yellow ochre again, I can go ahead and even more, I can add that yellow ochre just underneath in some places, not all the way, and soften that down and create that shadow underneath the sand as well, where the sand is rippling along. Even do a little bit here, just to give that. Remember, lights and darks, shadows, that's what painting is all about. We're going to take a little painterly moment to focus on clouds and sky. A lot of the paintings that we're going to do, if they're landscapes, are going to have elements of each. And every sky is different on any given day, but there are certain things that we want to look for. And it's always a great idea to just pop outside and study the sky every now and then, because as a painter, you really want to be able to pay attention to certain details that give you that edge. So as you'll see, I've already prepped the canvas in a blue, and it fades down to a lighter blue. So at any given time, the sky is generally at least two different blues. It could go from a Caribbean turquoise at the base to an overwhelming cobalt at the top. If there's a storm brewing, there'll be some grays. So above us, we see that deep, deep blue, almost like you're looking up into space. Then as you head towards the horizon, all of the atmosphere and dust gets in the way. So as it heads towards the horizon, it gets lighter, but it also gets grayer. And we do that by adding white and maybe even adding a little of a complement touch of orange even to kind of really gray it down. So be careful not to make a cartoon sky where it's just one color. We at least want it to get lighter towards the horizon. We're also going to be putting some clouds on our sky. One of the most common errors is to try to get the clouds done quickly. So I want to control what happens up on my canvas. So I'm only going to use a small amount of white. So I'm wiping a little off. And I'm going to start with a cloud right about here. The white is going to be where the lightest part of the cloud is. Remember, with all the other paintings that we've done, there's always a light source. The same goes for clouds as well. It's going to have shadows and lights. A little bit of white. Now I'm going to push against the bristle so that the bristles open up and create a kind of a softer, diffused, scrubbed feeling for my clouds. Not great for your brush, but it's great for clouds. So here I go, and I'm shaking it a little bit and I'm forming a cloud. I'm pushing up against the canvas. It's scratching into that. And as you can see, just on its own, it's creating that lighter edge. See if I push this way, push that lighter edge. This is where I have too much coffee and it really works for me. So we don't want to create recognizable shapes also. You know, you don't need to have the dragon in the sky or a fire truck cloud unless that's something that you're particularly trying to work into your painting, which would be an interesting thing. So now I have a diffused lower edge and a much more solid upper edge. It's still not too much, but depending on where I'm standing, as the clouds head towards the horizon, you're going to see more of that flat edge. But if they're up above you, you're not going to see a flat bottom. So as they're up higher, you might see more of the drop in the cloud. So I'm going to take a small amount of purple. Again, control is key. We do that by not putting too much paint on the brush. And then I'm going to add a little tiny bit of burnt sienna in there to warm that up. Now, if there's a fire, it may not be these colors. If there's a sunset, it may be pink, maybe orange, maybe other colors. So just take a look at what color you want to introduce. And then I'm going to add a little bit of white. So my burnt sienna, a little bit of purple, a little bit of white. So I can add some character into my cloud. And I'm going to start to blush the cloud a little bit, create more cloud. As you can see, I'm going to pick up a little bit. If you're going to use a little water, really just a little bit of water. Otherwise, you'll lose that, see, you'll lose that scrubby edge that you get otherwise. So I'm going to take my brush and move that around a little bit. Kind of blush that. Now I've covered up some of my white, as you can see. Okay. Now, as I said, that I did put some water on, and you can see why we don't use a lot of water. Now, if that happens, just use a paper towel and kind of scrub back up into it. There you go. We really want to control how much water we use as well. So I'll come back in with my white and a little of that blush. And I'm going to create a second layer in that cloud, the front area, because they're not flat, they're not one-dimensional, they're not two-dimensional. There's lobes to clouds. So you can get some of those happening too. Maybe a whole other cloud that's kind of breaking off from the first one. So on, like so. All right, so I'm going to go over here and start another one because I want that to dry so that when I add the white back in where the sunlight is going to hit it, I'm going to get a clean white. Otherwise, the more white you add in, it's just going to blend and it's going to take forever to build up for your white. So let's start another one lower down. Maybe it's out at the horizon. Again, picking up just a little of the white. And this time I know that it's out on the horizon, so I'm going to create a little flat edge of dry brushing. That's just scraping that color across. And I'm going to pick up some more white, teeny bit. And I'm pushing up against the bristle again, creating a shape. I want that to be smaller and flatter, and I don't want it to be as bright. I'm just going to add the little lights to it in places. And I'm going to leave that one alone and come back here because it's dry right now. So I'm picking up some more white, and we want to think of this as being built up. We don't need to finish it right away. So again, with the white here and scrubbing, and I like this edge in here. This one just needs to be a little bit not so dark. And sometimes a cloud is high and the sun is hitting it from below. So in that case, you'll come from underneath. You can create a whole UFO-shaped cloud like I did. So you're going to do the same thing with a cloud as you would with any other object that we've painted all along. You're just going to continue to work a little bit at a time, creating the shape by adding lights and darks. Remember that it's a cloud, it's vaporous, so therefore you don't want to go in with a lot of paint and create the cartoon cloud, because it would look something like that. So you can see the difference between using way too much paint and just coming in softly, slowly, gradually building your cloud until it looks like the ones we see in the sky. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this little tip, and I'll see you in our next step-by-step acrylic painting with Christine. Thanks very much for watching. Now, if you'd like to take a class with me on Zoom, you can sign up on my website through the link in the description below this video. And if you've enjoyed the show, we'd really appreciate any support you can lend us through our Patreon, also in the description below. Because it's through the sponsorship of viewers like you that we can continue to make the show, and every little bit helps. So thanks again, and we will see you soon.